Today we're going to be working on Unit C, Application of Systems of Equation, day number 3. Our content objective is students will be able to solve word problems that lead to a multi-step equation or a system of two equations. Our language objective is students will be able to translate word problems into a multi-step equation or a system of two equations. And last but not least, why am I learning this? Well, it's important for real-world problems, which we've been exploring for the past couple lessons, and there's another one to come. So first, let's go ahead and jump into the first word problem. So number 1, it says, a hairdresser is considering ordering a certain shampoo. Company A charges $5 per bottle plus a $25 handling fee. Company B charges $9 per bottle plus a $5 handling fee. For how many bottles is the cost the same? What is the cost? So first of all, they want to know how many bottles and what the cost is going to be. And for those reasons, I'm going to go ahead and use those things to represent the variables. So I'm going to go ahead and say B to represent the number of bottles and C to represent the cost. Now, let's take a look at Company A. Company A is charging $5 per bottle plus a $25 handling fee. Since it's $5 per bottle, I'm going to go ahead and write 5B plus the $25 equals the total cost. Now, generally speaking, we're used to seeing things in the form of slope-intercept form, which y equals mx plus b. So in this case, b is acting like the x, so c is going to act like the y. So I'm going to go ahead and put c up front. So the cost equals $5 for every bottle, so you multiply that, plus the $25 handling fee. Okay, now let's go ahead and do that for Company B. Company B is very similar, except it charges $9 per bottle, so that's going to be 9 times B, plus the $5 handling fee. And by doing that, that is going to give us our total cost, which is going to be a C. So now the question is, for how many bottles is the cost the same? So they want to know what is C equal. Sorry, let's rewind there. It says, how many bottles is the cost going to be the same? We are going to be solving for B. And then last but not least, they're going to ask for the cost. So that would be solving for C. So now that we have two equations, what am I going to do? Well, what I'm going to do is take this expression, because this is what equals C, and I'm going to go ahead and substitute it in for, you've guessed it, C. So by replacing C with this expression, I'm going to get 5B plus 25 equals 9B plus 5. Since we have variables on both sides, I do prefer to move it to the left. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, subtract 9B from both sides, leaving me with negative 4b plus 25 equals 5. Since my variables move to the left, I'm going to have to move my constants over to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and do the inverse by subtracting 25 from both sides, leaving me with negative 4b equals negative 20. At this point, if I divide both sides by a negative 4, I'm going to be left with b equals a positive 5. So a lot of times my students will do the work and they forget a negative sign and things like that, and their final answer ends up being negative. Now be very careful. B represents the number of bottles. If your answer was negative, would that make sense? If it doesn't, please look back to see if you've made a mistake. Because here, I worked it out and it was positive, but like I said, some students work it out and it ends up being negative. So B represents the number of bottles, so I'm going to say they will be the same since I set them equal to each other. They will be the same when there are 5 bottles. Now, the next question is going to be, well, what is the cost going to be with those 5 bottles? Well, here's all you need to do. Since they're going to be the same, you can choose either Company A's equation or Company B's equation, because again, they will be the same cost. So just because I have more room here, I'm going to go ahead and use this one. I have C equals 5. Instead of B, I'm going to replace it with 5. And then I will add the 25. So here C equals 25, because 5 times 5 is 25, plus another 25 is going to give me 50. So here, in order to answer the question, what is the cost going to be? 5 bottles will cost $50. So again, it's important that you identify what your variables represent, so that way when you do solve, in this case C equals 50, I can look back and say, oh, C equals the total cost. So in a case when you're buying 5 bottles, I can see that if C equals 50, the cost will equal 50 as well. Okay, so now at this note, what I'm going to have you do is try the next example on your own. So let's see how well we did. So it says here, the Lackluster Game Rental Store charges an annual fee of $25.50 plus $2 per game rental. The Games R Us store charges an annual fee of $16.50 plus $5 per game. For how many game rentals will the cost be the same at both stores? What is the cost? Okay, so here, since they want to know how many game rentals and what the cost is going to be, I'm going to go ahead and say G is the number of game rentals and C is going to represent the total cost. Now, we have two different companies. The first one's the Lackluster company and the second company is Games R Us. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and create the equations for these two companies. For Lackluster, it says they charge an annual fee of $25.50 plus $2 per game rental. So here, regardless of how many game rentals, they're going to be charged $25.50. That would be your constant. Now your coefficient is going to be 2 because depending on how many games they rent, the price is going to vary. So I'm going to go ahead and put C, the cost is going to equal $25.50 plus 2G. Now just understand that this is not how it's normally written. We would normally put the 2G in front, but here we directly translated that the cost is going to be the $25.50 plus the $2 per game, which is 2G. Now what about Games R Us? Same idea. Well, they charge an annual fee of $16.50. So that's a constant, plus $5 per game, that's your coefficient. So I'm going to go ahead and write C equals the cost, $16.50 plus 5G. But again, please understand if you put 5G in front of the $16.50, it's totally fine. In fact, we prefer to have it written that way. But again, I'm showing it to you like this because it's almost a direct translation from words to equation. Okay, well now they're wondering when is the cost going to be the same? So you can think of it in two ways. One, you can say, okay, well they want to know when they're going to be the same, so I can just set these two equations equal to each other. Or you can think of it as substitution, that hey, this here represents C, $25.50 plus 2G, so I can take that expression and substitute it in for C here. And then from there, either or, you're going to get the same setup. I'm going to go ahead and move my variable over to the left, leaving me with $25.50 minus 3G equals $16.50. Now I'm going to, since I moved the variable to the left, I'm going to move my constant over to the right by subtracting it, leaving me with negative 3G equals negative 9. So at this point I can say G equals 3. And again, G represents the number of game rentals. For the first question of how many game rentals will the cost be the same? So by 3 game rentals, Lackluster and Games R Us are going to be charging the same amount. But the next question is, well, what will that cost end up being? Okay, so again, both stores will cost the same for 3 game rentals, but now let's take a look at what will the cost be. Since we got G equals 3, let's go ahead and plug it into one of these two equations. Now, does it really matter which one? The answer is no. So I went ahead and plugged it into this one, leaving me with C equals $31.50. So to answer the question, the cost of 3 rentals will be $31.50 for both Lackluster and Games R Us because they are the same. Okay, so now moving on to another example. So it's the same idea. So let's go ahead and try it. Badger Rent-A-Car rents compact cars at a daily rate of $58.80 plus 15 cents per mile. Cactus Rent-A-Car rents cars at a daily rate of $55.60 plus 55 cents per mile. For what mileage is the cost the same? What is the cost? So here they want to know mileage and they want to know cost. So I'm going to go ahead and say M for the number of miles and C for the total cost. So the two companies is Badger's Rent-A-Car and then we have Cactus Rent-A-Car. So for Badger, they're charging $58.80 plus 15 cents per mile. So this here is definitely my coefficient because it's for every mile. And this is going to be my constant because that's not going to change in this case because we're looking at a day. So the cost, which is C, is going to be equal to the constant, which is 58.80, plus the coefficient, which is going to be the 15 cents per mile. What about the Cactus? Well, it's going to be charged the $55.60, which is your constant, plus the 55 cents per mile, that's your coefficient. So I'm going to go ahead and say C equals at $55.60 plus the 55 cents per mile, which is 55 cents times M. So here I'm going to go ahead and set them equal to each other because that's what they're wanting to know. When is the cost going to be the same? So basically what I did was I took the expression for C and substituted in for C, and this is what I end up with. I'm going to go ahead and move my coefficient to the left, or aka variables, since I do have on both sides, leaving me here with a total of 4/10 M left. Since I moved the variable to the left, I'm going to go ahead and move my constant over to the right by subtracting it. So that leaves me with a negative 4/10 M equals negative 3 2/10. So now all you have to do is divide both sides by the negative 4/10. Now here's where you need to be very careful because a lot of my students have been writing it incorrectly. So here it's going to be 3 2/10 divided by 4/10. Please remember that you are going to have to move your decimal over. And then here, can 4 go into 3? No. Can 4 go into 32? Yes, perfectly 8 times. So here the answer is M equals 8. What does that mean? Well, since M stands for the number of miles, I'm going to say this basically means the cost will be the same after 8 miles. Okay? So now the next question is, well, what's the cost? Okay, well, in that case, since we figured out what M is, I still need to figure out what the cost is. I'm going to take what I've learned, which is there's 8 miles for the cost to be the same. I'm going to plug that into one of the two equations. It does not matter which one. I'm going to go ahead and pick Cactus. I'm just going to simplify what I have here, and that's going to give me $60, which means for the 8 miles, both companies would be charging me $60. So at 8 miles, both companies will charge $60. Okay, so now go ahead and pause the video and try number 4 on your own. Okay, so let's see how well we did. The population of Clinton is 77,200, but it's growing at 1,600 people per year. Oak Valley has a population of 73,200, but it's growing 2,100 people per year. When will both towns have equal population? Well, they're looking for two things. Okay, they're looking for how many years, first of all, and then what will that population be? So I'm going to go ahead and say Y for the number of years and P for the total population. Now, we're looking at two places. We're looking at Clinton and we're looking at Oak Valley. So in order to figure out what it's going to be for Clinton, let's see. Clinton is 77,200, but is growing at 1,600 people per year. So again, that tells me, that hints me to, it's probably going to be my coefficient. So I'm going to say, first of all, think, should it be Y equals or P equals? Is it going to be the number of years equals or the population equals? Well, despite what we normally do, because we're used to seeing y equals, it's actually going to be p equals because we want to know what the total population is. The total population is from what they already have, which is the 77,200, plus the 1,600y. So that's every year. Same thing with Oak Valley. It's going to be p equals 73,200 plus the 2,100 people per year. Okay, again, since they want to know when the population is going to be the same, let's set them equal to each other. Or you can think of it as substitution. Since we have variables on both sides, I like to move mine over to the left. So subtracting that, sorry, this should be y's and not x's. Leaving me with 77,200 minus 500y equals 73,200. Now that we have variables to the left, I want to move my constant over to the right. So I'm going to go and subtract that from both sides. So last but not least, I got to divide off my coefficient, and that would leave me with y equals 8. Now, what does that mean? Well, y is the number of years. So I'm going to say that both towns will have the same population in 8 years. Okay, notice they didn't ask me what that population is, so I'm just going to stop here and we're done. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the last one together. Suppose you have $40 in your bank account and you start saving $10 every week. Your best friend has $238 in his bank account and is withdrawing $23 every week. In how many weeks will your account balances be the same? Now this one's different. Number one, still we're looking for how many weeks is it going to be, and then the other part of it technically would be what the current balance would be, or the total amount of money, whichever you want to think of it as. So we're going to look at yourself and you're going to look at your friend. So here we go. Well, your account, so I'm going to say W equals or B equals. If we're talking about the account, I'm going to say B equals because the current balance equals. You started with $40 and you start saving $10 every week. The word saving makes me think that we're definitely adding every week. So first I'm going to add, and since it's $10 every week, I'm going to go ahead and put 10W. Okay, now what about your best friend's current balance? Well, their current balance is made up of, let's see, $238 in the account, so that's what they start with, 238. You could even consider that as the initial value because that's how much they started with, and is withdrawing. Well, withdrawing is different than saving. Withdrawing means you're taking money out. So your current balance would be less, so we're going to subtract $23 every week. So since it's every week, we're going to subtract 23W. Okay, so how many weeks will the account balances be the same? So again, they want to know when is it going to be the same. You can think of it as I'm going to set the two equations together to see when they will equal each other, or you can just see it as, look, I know the value of B in this case, the expression, I can plug it into the other B, which would leave me with 40 plus 10W equals 238 minus 23W. Since we do have variables on both sides, we normally like to move it to the left. So I'm going to add 23W to both sides, which leaves me with 40 plus 33W equals 238. Since the variables did move over to the left side, I'm going to go ahead and try to move the constant over to the right by subtracting it from both sides, leaving me with 33W equals 198. Now, last but not least, simply divide off your coefficient, which leaves me with W equals 6. Now, what does this mean? Well, W refers to the number of weeks. So when will both of you guys have the same account balance? I would say within 6 weeks. And since that's all it asks, that's all I need to do. Well, that's going to conclude the lesson for today. Thank you so much for tuning in as always, and until next time, bye.